Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we are going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation, and during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions between the village of Robotyne and the village of Novohrodivka. This information was provided by different neutral mappers, once again without any geolocation that can confirm this. So this is additional Russian progress. Now let's move further and let's talk about the village of Urozhaine and the village of Staromayorska. As you can see, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor as well. The Russian sources published the video of how the Russian Sons of Anarchy were attacking the Ukrainian positions on the road between the village of Makarovka and the village of Staromayorska. The Ukrainians had their positions below the bridge, this is the bridge, and the Russians attacked the territory, mined the bridge, and destroyed Ukrainian positions. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps. So once again, the Russians were moving along the road between the village of Staromayorsk and Makarovka. The Russian soldiers landed exactly in this point, mined this territory, and destroyed. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. Now let's move further and let's talk about the village of Bogoyavlenka, Vodyane, Vuhledar, the Vuhledar direction. Just yesterday we were talking that the Russians managed to cross the river of Kashlagach in several directions and establish very strong positions on the Ukrainian side, and today we continue receiving updates exactly from this territory. The Ukrainian sources are saying that most likely there are going to be no clashes for the city of Vuhledar. In the Vuhledar area the situation is close to critical. After capturing most of the territory of the South Donbass 3 number 3 mine, the Russian armed forces are expected to try to bypass the Ukrainian further positions with a common vector to the village of Bogoyavlenka. In the direction of Zolotaya Niva, heavy battles are also ongoing. The Russian armed forces do not shy away from mechanized assaults, which are followed by waves of soldiers. So summarizing everything that was published by the Ukrainians, most likely the Russians are going to attack in the direction of Novohrodivka using this route of attack, and maybe the Russians will include additional wave attack from Prichistovka, and the Russians are planning to attack the village of Bogoyavlenka from the area of the coal mine in South Donbass number 3. So this is the second direction of possible Russian attack. If the Russians are able to improve their positions and to complete this attack successfully, then there are going to be no clashes for the city of Vuhledar, because basically Vuhledar would be encircled, and as soon as the Ukrainians see any progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation, the Ukrainians most likely will abandon their positions in the northern direction. So this is the plan of the armed forces of Russian Federation. We'll see what is going to be next. Now let's talk about the Kurakhove direction. As you can see, we have lots of icons with the flag. Currently we haven't received anything that can confirm Russian control over the Selidovska prison number 82, but we have a lot of changes on the ground according to different mappers. We have every single mapper has adjusted his map, but there are some differences that I would like to point your attention to. So this is the map update of the pro-Ukrainian sources Deep State. As you can see, the Russians managed to secure the fields between Ugostre, Krasnogorovka, Georgievka, and Maximilianovka. Significant progress, as you can see. And also, according to Deep State, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the Selidovska prison number 82. But there are some differences. For example, the pro-Russian sources are showing almost the same, but with one important difference. The pro-Russian sources and the neutral sources are saying that the Russians were attacking the prison number 82 along the railways between Gostre, and the Russians were entering this territory from the north, and this is very important. And as for pro-Ukrainian sources, they're saying that the Russians were attacking the prison from the completely opposite direction. The Russians were attacking this territory from the south. It is very important because there are completely different scenarios for upcoming day. Because if the Russians took the prison from the north, that means that they have open gates and open window to attack further in the northern direction to Vovchinka, Alexandropol. But if the Russians were attacking the prison from the south, that means that the Russians have possibilities to move further and to complete the encirclement of Maximilianovka and the Ukrainian forces who are currently located here. So the difference are very big, but it will just determine just one next Russian step. Either the Russians are going to attack to Maximilianovka today on the 22nd of September, or the Russians are going to move further in the northern direction with the purpose to complete the creation of cauldron for the Ukrainians between Nevskaya, Nivoyskaya, Zhelana, Druga, Alexandra, Polingostre. Now let's talk about the Ukrainsk direction. We haven't received anything about additional Russian progress on the territory of Hirnyk, but today we start receiving just photos so that the Russians began artillery preparation, very heavy artillery preparation of the city. The Russians are bombing, and most likely today or by the Monday, the Russians will try to enter this town and to establish complete control over the eastern part. So something big is going to happen today. Now let's talk to the west about the western flank of Ukraine. We have additional changes on the ground according to different mappers. The neutral mappers are saying that the Russians did establish complete control over the coal mine and managed to improve their positions around the landfill Terikon Stilidovska of the coal of mine Stilidovska. So this territory remains under complete Ukrainian control, and the Russians are trying to encircle the territory with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back. So this is the situation on this flank. As for the northern part, we have additional changes on the ground in Russian favor towards the city of Selidovo from the southeast. With this information we received yesterday, so today we receive additional confirmation. Now let's talk about Novohrodivka. The Russians managed to improve their positions, and according to neutral mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to establish complete control over the mine in the western part of Novohrodivka. This is a significant victory of the armored forces of Russian Federation. They managed to finish the securing of the western flank. Now the Russians are not afraid of anything. The Ukrainians will not be able to restore control over Novohrodivka ever. So the Russians control every single Terikon landfill around, and this is strategical points. The Ukrainians, I'll remind you, according to information we have, don't have any landfill, any Terikon on their controlled territory, just some landfills on the territory of Mirnograd in the Pokrovsk direction. So once again, the situation for the Ukrainians is very critical. Now let's move to Toretsk, where the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt, and basically we can say that the southwestern flank of Toretsk collapsed as a result of Russian offensive operation, and we have video that was provided us by Ukrainian sources. First of all, we have map update according to neutral mappers. As you can see, according to this picture, the Russians were moving from the northwestern part of New York in the northwestern direction, and as a result of fast lightning attack, the Russians managed to break through to enter the village of Leonidovka and to take the village under complete control. So this is the distance the Russians managed to cross during that attack, and we have the video. The video shows us the beginning. There is like 1 minute video, 1 minute and 20-second video, and this video shows us the process of movements of the Russian forces from the central part of New York towards the village of Leonidovka, how the Russians managed to land infantry, and how the Russians began clearing and securing operation. As a result of this offensive, most of the village was captured. Most likely currently there are still a lot of job to do for the Russians. Some vehicles were destroyed, but in the final part of the video we might see how the Russian empty vehicles were returning back to the central part of New York. Significant progress, and this is as a result of this attack the Russians managed to cut additional supply roads, supply lines. Furthermore, now the Russians from this territory are able to continue offensive in the southwestern direction with the purpose to attack Sukhaya Balka and to take under control the dense network of the fortifications between Sukhaya Balka and New York itself. We're talking about this territory. This is very well fortified positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, and if they lose them, they might lose a lot, much more. As for Toretsk itself, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the central part, the citadel, but most likely due to this situation and due to the Russian breakthrough, very likely there are going to be no clashes for this citadel, because the Ukrainians, if the Russians continue advance, would be forced to fall back from this territory in the northern direction. And once again, if we summarize the territories that were taken by the Russians since the beginning of Toretsk, New York offensive and the territories that remain under complete Ukrainian control, we can say that the Russians already established control over 70% of the Toretsk New York agglomeration. So the battle is about to be finished, and obviously by the end of this year, the Russians will be able to take under control everything here and to reach the southern outskirts of Konstantinovka. Now let's move further. As for Chasiv Yar, we haven't received anything, just regular videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in the northern part. So I'll remind you that according to my projections, most likely the Russians are going to attack Chasiv Yar exactly from the northern direction, from the call Severny. As for the Sivers direction, we haven't received anything special. Now let's talk about the southern Kupiansk direction. As you can see, we have a lot of icons. I'll remind you that just yesterday, the armed forces of Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Nevsky. We have the video with the Russian flag, which confirms complete control. And this video we got yesterday in the evening. We already discussed this yesterday, but today we continue receiving additional updates. And the sources are saying that as a result of fast lightning attack, the Russians managed to establish control not just over the village of Nevsky. The Russians crossed the river of Zheribets and attacked and began assault of the village by the name of Novohrodivka. And as a result of offensive, the village of Novohrodivka was captured today, this morning, on the 22nd of September of 2024. Furthermore, different reliable sources, including pro-Russian sources and neutral sources, and mainly pro-Russian and neutral sources, reported that during the previous night, the Russians managed to take under control the fields, the salient between the village of Nevsky and the village of Makiivka. So summarizing everything that we've just discussed, the Russians currently control something like this: the village of Novohrodivka and the positions between Nevsky and Makiivka. Significant progress, as you can see. So as for this salient, the Ukrainians basically withdrew their positions without showing any resistance, because they understand if they stay there, they would stay there forever. So this is the situation. Now we understand that most likely the Russians during the next few weeks will try to improve their positions between Novohrodivka and Karmazinovka Novodiana. So these fields and this dense network of the fortifications is the primary target for the Russians. And after this, the Russians can move further in the western direction with the purpose to attack the villages of Karpovka and Rytka-Dub. So these two villages are very important, because during the previous two battles for Lyman, the both offensives in direction of Lyman started from the line between Karpovka and Rytka-Dub. So who controls these two villages basically have many chances to move further in the southern direction and to attack and to take without any resistance the city of Lyman. So this is most likely is the beginning of the third battle for Lyman. For now, very far from the town itself, but obviously with the main purpose to take this territory under control. Now let's talk about Peshana. And according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the flower of Peshana continued blooming during the previous 24 hours, and as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to get as close as possible to the village of Kurakhove. And currently the distance between the edge Russian positions in the fields and the road and between first farms is less than 1.5 kilometers. So basically this is already the clashes on the territories of towns and villages along the river of Oskol. And currently the length of Russian front line in this area is around 10 kilometers. From this 10 kilometers line, the Russians in the very near future, obviously before the end of this year, will begin offensive operation in the western direction with the purpose to cut this territory in two. And if the Russians are able to do this, then they will do the same as they currently are doing on Nevsky, Makiivka and Lyman direction. They will handle with every single direction separately. First probably with the southern direction and then with the northern. So obviously the battle for Kursk is just a matter of time when the Russians are able to take everything until Oskol River under their control. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Kursk offensive, the Kursk direction. We have additional changes on the ground. First, let's talk about Ukrainians. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, Deep State, the Ukrainians managed to encircle completely the Russians in Malaya Loknya. This territory was taken by the Ukrainians, and yesterday we got the video of how the Russians were counterattacking them. In this video, we were guessing what exactly the Russians were doing. Maybe the Russians were counterattacking the Ukrainians. Maybe the Russians were trying to unblock the Russians in Maloloknya. We don't know for sure, but today the pro-Ukrainian sources reported that as a result of Ukrainian attack, they managed to close the cauldron and to encircle the Russians completely. So let's wait for additional updates. I don't think that the Ukrainian source is showing us real and correct information, but anyway, time will tell us. On the other hand, the Russians made several attempts to attack the Ukrainian positions between Lyubimovka and Koryneva, and as a result of those fast lightning attacks, the Russians managed to answer this forest, this huge forest, and to begin fighting for this. So we have video that was provided us by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see several attacks from the Russian side with a significant number of armored vehicles and the personnel carriers and infantry, of course, and as a result of these several attacks, the Russians first managed to secure the forest bit to the north and to answer the biggest forest between Lyubimovka and Koryneva. So currently there are very heavy clashes, and the main target of the Russians to secure this territory completely and to reach the eastern outskirts of the forest and then to move further in the direction of Lyubimovka from the northwest. So this is the Russian plan, and this is exactly what they're going to do right now. As for Glushkova territory, we haven't received anything for the previous 24 hours, but the Russians are saying that Ukrainians were completely defeated. They have no resources for regrouping, they have no forces to begin additional offensive, and most likely they're not going to do anything more. They will probably either try to hold the territories they got or to fall back further in the south or retreat back to the territory of Ukraine. And that's it for this video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.